Valeth had lived for 12 million years. He had watched stars being born. He had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a beach. He had killed creatures that could swallow planets whole. In all that time, he had never once felt small. He was Kelver. His kind were worshipped as gods across 1,000 worlds. They shaped reality with their thoughts. They moved through dimensions like humans move through rooms. Death was a concept they had forgotten long ago. So when the summons came to the crystalline citadel of Etheria, Valeth felt only mild curiosity. The great hall was filled with his kind, beings of living light and ancient power. Their forms shifted and glowed against walls made of frozen starlight. Something had disturbed them. Something had made them afraid. The elder stood at the center of the hall. She was the oldest of them all. She remembered the first moment of the universe, the great explosion that started everything. When she spoke, reality itself seemed to listen. "The Void Wyams have returned," she said. A ripple of fear passed through the assembled gods. Valeth felt it too, though he tried to hide it. The Void Wyams were older than the universe. They existed in the darkness before creation. They ate stars and planets and entire galaxies. They were perhaps the only things in existence that could truly threaten the Calver. "They have breached the dimensional barrier," the elder continued. "They are consuming the outer systems. Many of our kind have already fled to pocket dimensions. Those who remain must defend what we can." Valeth stepped forward. "Where do you need me?" The elder turned her ancient eyes toward him. "The Helion Cluster. It is a small region, far from the center of things. But it contains inhabited worlds that deserve protection. Which species lives there?" "Only one spacefaring civilization. They call themselves humans." Valeth searched his memory. Humans. Yes, he had heard of them. A young species from a small planet orbiting an ordinary star. They had only existed for about 50,000 years. Their individual lives lasted less than a century. They had no divine essence, no cosmic powers, no ability to manipulate reality. By every measure the Kelvern used, they were completely insignificant. "You send me to protect insects?" Valeth asked. He did not hide his disappointment. "I send you where you are needed," the elder replied. Her voice carried a strange weight. Other assignments were given. More important regions went to more powerful Calvern. Valeth accepted his task with poor grace, babysitting primitives while his brothers and sisters fought real battles. It was almost insulting. As the assembly ended and the gods departed for their various missions, the elder caught Valeth's arm. Her touch was like grabbing a piece of the sun. He stopped and looked at her. "A word of caution," she said quietly. "About what?" "The Void Wyams? I have fought them before." "About the humans." Valeth almost laughed. "What about them?" The elder's eyes were deep and old and full of something he could not read. "Do not underestimate them. There is a reason we do not interfere in their affairs. There is a reason the Accords forbid our kind from provoking them." Now Valeth did laugh. "The Accords exist to protect primitive species from our influence, to prevent us from accidentally crushing cultures that cannot defend themselves. That is what we tell ourselves," the elder said. "But ask yourself this, young one. In all 1,000 worlds where we are worshipped as gods, have we ever forbidden ourselves from interfering with a species? Have we ever written laws specifically to avoid provoking someone?" Valeth had no answer for that. "Go," the elder said. "Fight the Void Wyams, protect the Helion Cluster. But watch the humans carefully. And remember that fear sometimes wears the mask of wisdom." Valeth departed the citadel, still confused by her words. He traveled through folded space, crossing distances that would take human ships thousands of years in mere moments. The Helion Cluster grew before him, a small collection of stars in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. thought he could already feel the void worm's presence. It was like a wound in reality, a place where existence itself had begun to rot. The creature had sent its tendrils ahead, smaller pieces of itself that consumed everything they touched. They were attacking something near the cluster's edge. Valeth prepared himself for what he would find. A destroyed fleet, probably. Scattered debris and frozen corpses. Perhaps a few survivors fleeing in damaged ships, desperate for rescue. That was how most species reacted to the void worms. They ran. They hid. They died. He emerged from folded space above the battle and stopped. The human fleet had not run. They had not hidden. They were fighting. Dozens of ships moved through space in complex patterns, their weapons firing constantly at the writhing mass of void tendrils. Explosions bloomed in the darkness. Human voices crackled across every communication frequency, shouting orders and warnings and things that sounded like jokes. And underneath it all, pounding through the void like a heartbeat, was music. Strange, aggressive music with heavy drums and screaming guitars. Human war music, Valeth realized. They were playing it on open channels, broadcasting it to the enemy. A voice cut through the chaos. It belonged to whoever commanded this fleet. It was a woman's voice, calm and steady, despite the destruction happening all around her. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. Concentrate fire on Tendril Cluster 7. Destroyers, you're out of position. Get back in formation. And someone tell the void worm that we don't appreciate uninvited guests in our neighborhood. Laughter followed. Actual laughter in the middle of a battle against cosmic horrors. Valeth floated in space, watching the impossible scene below him. These creatures were facing something that could destroy their entire civilization. They should be screaming. They should be praying. They should be begging the universe for mercy. Instead, their fleet commander was making jokes. And her people were laughing. For the first time in millions of years, Valeth felt something he could not name. It sat in his chest like a cold weight. It was not quite fear. It was not quite confusion. It was the feeling of seeing something that should not exist. He descended toward the human flagship, a vessel they had named Defiance. He did not know yet how perfectly that name described the species that built it. He did not know that everything he believed about mortals was about to be destroyed. He only knew that the version of this thing he believed about mortals was about to be destroyed. He only knew that the Elder's warning was echoing in his mind, louder with every passing moment. What could hairless apes possibly teach a god? He was about to find out. Valeth entered the human flagship in his physical form. He chose to appear as a 10-foot being made of living starlight. His eyes burned like small suns. His voice echoed with the power of creation itself. When he walked, the metal floor hummed with energy that he expected the humans to fall to their knees. He expected worship, or at least terror. Every other species in the galaxy reacted this way when they saw a Kelvern in person. Some fainted. Some wept. Some immediately built temples. Admiral Lyra Chen glanced up from her tactical display, looked at him for exactly 2 seconds, nodded once, and returned to her work. "Welcome aboard," she said without stopping what she was doing. "Try not to step on anyone. We're a bit busy." Valeth stood frozen in shock. A junior officer walked past him, stopped, and held out a metal cup filled with dark liquid. "Coffee?" The young man offered. "You look like you could use some. Also, you might want to grab onto something. It's about to get bumpy." Before Valeth could respond, the ship shook violently. A void tendril had struck their shields. The bridge crew barely reacted. They adjusted their controls, reported damage, and continued fighting as if this was completely normal. "Shields at 60%, someone announced. "Reroute power from non-essential systems," Chun ordered. and tell the Hammer and the Righteous Fury to cover our flank. Those tendrils are trying to surround us." Valeth finally found his voice. "Do you know what I am?" Chun did not look up. "You're a Calvern, one of the cosmic beings that some species worship as gods. We've read the galactic files." She tapped her display, sending new orders to her fleet. "We don't do the worship thing, sorry. Too busy. Feel free to help with the giant space monsters if you want." The casual disrespect should have angered him. Instead, Valeth felt something closer to fascination. These creatures stood before a deity and treated him like a visiting colleague who had arrived at an inconvenient time. He moved to stand beside the side admiral and watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. The human fleet was taking damage. Several ships were already destroyed, their wreckage floating among the stars. But they kept fighting, kept pushing forward, kept refusing to retreat. Then Valeth saw something that made his ancient heart stutter. A human destroyer, badly damaged and leaking atmosphere, broke formation and accelerated directly toward the largest void tendril. The ship's captain appeared on the communication screen. She was young, maybe 30 years old by human standards. Blood ran down her face from a wound on her forehead. "Admiral, our engines are failing and we've lost weapons. Requesting permission for Protocol Omega." Chun's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "Permission granted, Captain Torres. It has been an honor." "The honor was mine, Admiral." Torres out. The destroyer accelerated to maximum speed and flew straight into the void tendril's mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a brilliant explosion erupted from within the creature, tearing it apart from the inside. The captain had detonated her ship's reactor core, turning her vessel into a weapon. But what struck Valeth was not the explosion. It was what he heard on the communication channel in those final seconds. Captain Torres had been singing an old Earth War song, something about not going gently into the night. And her crew had been singing with her dot. They knew they were going to die. They chose to die singing. That was... Valeth could not finish the sentence. "That was Protocol Omega," Chine said quietly. "When a ship is lost anyway, we make sure it counts." She finally looked at him, and he saw something hard and fierce in her eyes. "We don't waste anything. Not lives, not ships, not chances. Everything has to mean something." Another explosion lit up the view screen. Another human ship had sacrificed itself to take down a tendril cluster. The crew had ejected their reactor core like a bomb, then guided their crippled vessel into the blast to minimize the damage. "How many ships have you lost?" Valeth asked. 12 so far. About 3,000 people." Chun's voice was tight with controlled grief. "But we've destroyed 47 tendril clusters and prevented the worm from reaching the inner colonies. 18 billion people are still alive because of those 3,000. Why do you not retreat? Regroup? Find another way?" Chun turned to face him fully. Her eyes were tired but burning with something Valeth had never seen in a mortal before. It took him a moment to recognize it as absolute determination. "Retreat to where?" she asked. "Our homes are behind us. Our children are behind us. Our parents and friends and everyone we love are behind us. There is no behind us, God or whatever you are. There is only forward. There is only fighting until we win or die." Valeth had watched 1,000 species face extinction. Most begged for mercy. Most tried to bargain, offering treasures or worship or service in exchange for survival. Most simply gave up, accepting their fate with quiet despair. Humans did none of these things. Humans raged. The ship shook again. Alarms blared. A section of the hull had been breached, and crew members were dying in the vacuum of space. But the others kept working, kept fighting, kept refusing to accept the impossible odds against them. "We have a new contact," the sensor officer announced. A big one. Admiral, the main void worm is approaching. The tendrils were just the beginning. Chun studied the display. The creature appearing on their sensors was vast beyond imagination. It was larger than some moons, a writhing mass of darkness and hunger that existed only to consume. Valeth had fought such creatures before. He knew how powerful they were. He also knew that this human fleet could not possibly stand against it. "I will fight it," Valeth said. "Get your ships to safety. I will hold it back." Chun looked at him with something that might have been pity. "We're not leaving. And we're not hiding behind you." She reached for her communication controls. "But you might want to see this." She activated the fleet-wide channel. A voice went out to every surviving ship, every crew member, every human still fighting in the darkness. "All ships, this is Admiral Chun. The main worm is approaching. I know you're tired. I know you're scared. I know we've lost friends today." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was iron. "But we knew this was coming. We prepared for this. We trained for this. Today we show the universe what humanity is made of." She took a breath. "All ships, initiate Protocol Prometheus. Today we hunt." The response was immediate. Every ship in the fleet changed course, moving not away from the approaching horror, but toward it. The communication channels filled with human voices, shouting battle cries and prayers and promises to make the enemy bleed. Valeth felt his divine blood run cold. Protocol Prometheus. He did not know what it meant, but the way Chun had said it, the way the fleet had responded, told him everything he needed to know. These mortals were not trying to survive. They were trying to win. The void worm was massive beyond understanding. It blocked out the stars as it approached, a mountain of living darkness that existed only to feed. Its body twisted through multiple dimensions at once, appearing and disappearing in ways that hurt to look at. Smaller tendrils extended from its form like grasping fingers, each one large enough to crush a battleship. Valeth left the human flagship and took his true form in space. He became a being of pure cosmic fire, burning with the light of 1,000 suns. He gathered his power, the reality-shaping force that made him a god, and prepared to fight. He expected to carry this battle alone. The humans had brave hearts, but they were still mortals fighting with metal ships and chemical explosions. Against a void worm, such things should be useless. He was wrong. The human fleet spread into a complex formation and opened fire. But these were not ordinary weapons. Valeth watched in shock as missiles detonated against the worm's hide and actually damaged it. He sensed what the warheads contained and could not believe it. Compressed stellar core. The humans had somehow captured pieces of a dying star and turned them into weapons. Another volley followed. These missiles did something even stranger. Where they struck, gravity itself went mad. Parts of the worm's body collapsed inward, crushed by artificial black holes that lasted only seconds but caused tremendous damage. Gravity bombs. They had built gravity bombs. What is this? Valeth demanded over the communication channel. Admiral Chun's voice came back calm and professional. "We've been studying the void worms for 50 years. Finding pieces of them, analyzing their biology, figuring out what hurts them." A pause. "We knew they would come eventually. We wanted to be ready." Valeth threw himself into the battle, his cosmic fire burning through tendril after tendril. He was glorious, a god at war, everything his kind was supposed to be. But beside him, around him, the humans fought just as fiercely. Their ships danced through the chaos, avoiding attacks, delivering devastating strikes, dying when they had to, and they did die. Ships exploded. Crews were torn apart. Thousands of humans perished in the cold darkness of space. But what struck Valeth was how they died. He watched a pilot whose fighter had lost both engines. She could have ejected, tried to survive. Instead, She pointed her crippled ship at a tendril cluster and accelerated using the last of her maneuvering fuel. Her final words were to tell her squadron to avenge her. He watched engineers working in a compartment filled with radiation. They knew they were already dead, that the poison in the air had killed them the moment the shielding failed. But they kept working, kept repairing critical systems, kept buying time for their shipmates to escape. They died at their posts with tools in their hands. He watched a communications officer, barely more than a child by Velith standards, sit calmly at her station while fire spread around her. She relayed tactical data until the flames took her, never once screaming, never once begging for help. They were afraid. Velith could sense it. He could feel their terror, their desperate love for families they might never see again, their deep desire to survive. Humans were not fearless. They were perhaps the most fear-filled creatures he had ever encountered, but they fought anyway. They took their fear and wrapped it in duty. They transformed their terror into determination. They were afraid, and they fought anyway, and somehow that made their courage greater, not lesser. Velith had seen countless species face extinction. The ancient Valori had surrendered peacefully, hoping for mercy. The proud Catherine had panicked and scattered, making themselves easy targets. The wise Elorai had tried to negotiate, to reason with the darkness. Humans did something different. Humans raged against the dying of the light. During a brief pause in the fighting, Velith found himself beside a damaged transport ship. It was evacuating wounded soldiers from a destroyed cruiser. A Marine lay on a stretcher, both her legs crushed, her blood floating in small red spheres in the low-gravity dock. She was smiling. "Why?" Velith asked, appearing beside her. "Why do you smile when you are dying?" The Marine turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were glazed with pain, but the smile remained. "Because we're hurting it," she said. "Because we drew blood from something that's been eating worlds since before my species existed. Because tomorrow, someone will study this battle. They'll find a better way to fight. They'll build better weapons. And eventually, they'll kill this thing." She coughed, and blood bubbled on her lips. "Even if we lose today, we'll make this creature afraid. We'll make it remember that the little humans from the little planet fought back. That's enough." Her smile widened. "That's more than enough." The transport ship jumped away, carrying her to safety or death. Velith did not know. He floated in space, surrounded by destruction, and felt something break inside him. Some ancient certainty, some belief he had held for millions of years, shattered like glass. He had thought mortals were weak because they died. He was beginning to understand that perhaps they were strong because they died, and knew it and fought anyway. The battle continued. The Void Worm was wounded but not defeated. It began to adapt, learning from the human weapons, developing new defenses. The fleet's attacks became less effective. Ships died faster. The tide was turning. Admiral Chun's voice came over the channel. "All ships, prepare for Phase 2. The worm is adapting faster than expected. We need to accelerate the timeline. What is Phase 2? Velith asked. There was a pause. When Chun spoke again, her voice was heavy with something Velith recognized as grief. "We always knew we might not be able to kill it from the outside. We have another option." "What option?" "A team goes in. Inside the worm. They find its core, the nexus that holds its essence together. They plant a weapon there and destroy it from within. That is suicide." "Yes. How many?" 3,000 volunteers. We've had the list ready for 2 years. Chun's voice cracked slightly. They signed up knowing they wouldn't come back. Every single one of them understood what they were agreeing to. Velith felt something he had not experienced in millions of years. It might have been horror. It might have been awe. It was probably both. Why would anyone volunteer for certain death? Because they have families in the colonies. because they want their children to grow up in a universe without void worms, because they believe some things are worth dying for. Chun's voice steadied. And because they're human. It's what we do. The transport ships were already gathering, loading with soldiers who had known for years that this day might come. 3,000 humans preparing to fly into the mouth of a cosmic horror, armed with a bomb that could only be detonated by hand. 3,000 people saying goodbye to everything they loved. Velath looked at the worm, at the impossible creature that had destroyed civilizations older than Earth. Then he looked at the transport ships, at the tiny metal boxes filled with mortal beings who had chosen to die so that others might live. For the first time in 12 million years, Valeth felt small dot, and for the first time in 12 million years, he understood why. Valeth did something no Kelvern had done in 10 million years. He boarded a mortal transport ship and joined a suicide mission. The soldiers stared at him when he entered. He had reduced his form to something almost human-sized, though he still glowed with inner light. His presence filled the cramped space with warmth and power. "What are you doing here?" asked the mission commander, a sergeant major named Diego Vasquez. He was a stocky man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands. His eyes were calm, the eyes of someone who had already made peace with death. "I'm coming with you," Valeth said. "You're a god. You don't need to die with us. I want to understand." Valeth looked around at the 3,000 faces filling the transport ships. Young and old, men and women, every variety of human expression. Some were praying. Some were crying quietly. Some were joking with their friends, laughing at death. "I want to understand why you do this." Vasquez studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay close. Try not to get stepped on." The transport ships launched toward the Void Worm's massive form. Human fighters flew beside them, protecting them from tendrils that tried to swat them from the sky. Many fighters were destroyed. Many pilots died. But enough transports made it through, crashing into the worm's flesh and burning their way inside. The interior of the Void Worm was nothing like Valeth expected. It was not simply a body. It was a folded dimension, a universe of darkness contained within a living shell. The soldiers advanced through tunnels of impossible geometry, where up and down changed without warning, where distances meant nothing, where reality itself seemed sick. Strange creatures attacked them. Not tendrils, but something worse. The worm's internal defenses, beings of pure shadow that existed only to destroy. The humans fought them with rifles and grenades and bare hands when they had to. Valeth fought beside them, his cosmic fire burning through shadow after shadow. But he found himself protecting the mortals more than leading them. He moved at their pace, guarded their fragile bodies, watched them die in ways that would mean nothing to an immortal. And yet, they kept coming. Every time a soldier fell, another stepped forward. Every time a squad was destroyed, the survivors reorganized and pressed on. They moved deeper into the worm, following signals that led them toward its heart. Then they reached the core chamber, and everything changed. The worm's consciousness was waiting for them. It was not a physical presence. It was a psychic weight, an awareness older than stars pressing down on their minds. Valeth felt it as a philosophical challenge, an argument against existence itself. It was uncomfortable but manageable. The humans should have been destroyed. Mortal minds were not built to withstand such pressure. The worm showed them visions of the universe's vast indifference. It made them feel their own smallness, their insignificance, the absolute meaninglessness of their brief existence. It whispered to them that nothing they did mattered, that the stars would burn out, that entropy would claim everything, that in the end there would be only darkness and silence, and no one would remember they had ever existed. Some soldiers screamed. Some fell to their knees, clutching their heads. but not as many as Valeth expected. Most kept fighting, kept advancing, their minds bending but not breaking. Dot and Sergeant Major Vasquez did something that Valeth would remember for the rest of eternity. He laughed. Dot, standing in the heart of a cosmic horror, facing a mind that had destroyed civilizations. Vasquez laughed like he had just heard a good joke. The sound echoed through the chamber, bright and loud and impossibly alive. "Is that it?" he asked the darkness. "Is that your big weapon? Telling us we don't matter?" The Wyrm's presence pressed harder, showing him visions of his own death, of his family growing old without him, of his name being forgotten within a generation. Vasquez nodded slowly. "Yeah, we know. We've always known." He stepped forward, bloody and battered, a mortal man facing something that had eaten gods. "We build sandcastles, knowing the tide will come. We fall in love, knowing we'll lose each other. We create art, knowing it will crumble to dust. We raise children, knowing we won't live to see everything they become." He smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "We do it anyway. That's the whole point, you overgrown worm. That's the part you'll never understand." Around him, other soldiers were rising to their feet. The Wyrm's psychic assault was still crushing them, still showing them the meaninglessness of existence. But they were pushing through it, drawing strength from Vasquez's words, from each other, from something deep inside themselves that refused to quit. "You think mortality is our weakness," Vasquez continued. "It's our strength. Every moment matters because we only get so many. Every choice counts because we can't take them back. Every person we love is precious because we will lose them. You've existed forever and destroyed countless worlds, and what do you have? Nothing. You are nothing. You mean nothing. But I have a daughter who will remember me. I have friends who will tell stories about today. I have made a mark on a universe that doesn't care, and I made it anyway." He raised his rifle. "And now I'm going to kill you. Not because it will matter in a million years, but because it matters right now, to me, to my people, to every living thing you threatened. That's enough. That's more than enough." The humans charged. Valeth finally understood what the Elder had meant. He understood why gods feared humanity. It was not their weapons or their numbers or their technology. It was their philosophy. They had stared into the void since their first ancestor looked up at the stars and realized how small they were. They had faced the truth of their own mortality every single day of their existence, and they had decided to rage against it anyway. They did not fight despite knowing they might lose. They fought because the fighting itself had meaning. They lived as if every moment was their last because it might be. And that made them more alive than any immortal Valeth had ever known. They reached the core. It was a nexus of dark energy, a knot that held the Wyrm's dimensional body together. The bomb they carried could destroy it, but only from within. There was no time to escape. There was never going to be time to escape. The soldiers knew. They had always known. Vasquez began arming the device. The others formed a protective circle around him, fighting off the last defenders, buying seconds with their lives. "You should go," Vasquez told Valeth. "Carry our story back. Let them know we didn't fail." Valeth looked at the bomb, at the soldiers dying around them, at the mortal man who had laughed in the face of cosmic nihilism. Then he did something that surprised them both. He let go of his divine protections. He made himself vulnerable, truly vulnerable, for the first time in 12 million years. He felt the weight of mortality settle onto his shoulders. Felt time begin to move through him instead of around him. "I would like," he said softly, "to understand what it means to make a choice that truly matters." Vasquez stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the warmest expression Valeth had ever seen on a human face. "Welcome to the human race," he said, "even if it's just for the next 30 seconds. The bomb was armed. The countdown began, and Valeth stood among the soldiers, a god who had chosen to become mortal for one shining moment, waiting for the end. He was terrified. He was at peace. He finally understood. The countdown reached 10 seconds. Valeth had accepted his death. He had made peace with ending his 12-million-year existence beside these incredible mortals. He would die as they died, fighting for something that mattered. Then Sergeant Major Vasquez did something impossible. He grabbed Valeth, a being made of starlight and cosmic power, and threw him. The force was not physical. It was something else, something Valeth did not understand until later. In that moment, Vasquez used every bit of will he possessed, every ounce of the strange power that humans carried within them, and he hurled a god towards safety. "Someone has to tell them we won, dumbass," Vasquez shouted. And then he smiled, and the bomb detonated. Valeth was thrown through folded dimensions, through the collapsing interior of the dying worm, through spaces that should have crushed him to nothing. But something protected him, something warm and human and utterly impossible. He emerged into normal space, just as the void worm died. The explosion was beautiful and terrible. The creature that had eaten worlds and destroyed civilizations came apart in a wave of golden light. Its body collapsed, its dimensional folds unwound. Its ancient consciousness screamed once and then fell silent forever. 3,000 humans had done what gods could not. They had killed a void worm. Valeth floated in the debris field, surrounded by the remains of the battle. Human ships gathered around him, damaged and few in number, but still fighting, still surviving, still refusing to give up. Admiral Chun's voice came over the communication channel. "Report. Did the mission succeed?" "Yes," Valeth said. His voice was strange, changed somehow. "The worm is destroyed. Your people..." He could not finish. "I know," Chun said quietly. "I know. The survivors gathered what they could. Bodies when possible, names when not. 72% of the human fleet had been destroyed. Thousands of people had died. By any military measure, they had been devastated. But as Valeth watched the survivors, he saw no defeat in their eyes. They mourned their dead. They wept for their friends. And then they began planning. "The reactor repairs will take 6 hours," an engineer reported. "We can have weapons back online in 4. What about the colony evacuation?" Chun asked. "All 18 billion civilians are safe. The worm never got close. Good." Chun pulled up tactical displays on her burned and damaged console. "We need to analyze the battle data. Figure out what worked, what didn't. Next time, we'll lose fewer people. Next time." Valeth heard those words and felt a chill run through him. They had just lost 3,000 soldiers in a suicide mission, and they were already preparing for the next battle, already planning improvements, already turning sacrifice into knowledge. This was how they survived. This was how they grew. They died and learned and adapted and came back stronger. Every defeat became a lesson. Every loss became a foundation. Valeth returned to the celestial realm to deliver his report. The assembled Calvern listened in silence as he described the battle, the tactics, the weapons. He told them about Protocol Omega and Protocol Prometheus. He told them about soldiers who sang while they died, and engineers who worked in radiation because others might live. He told them about Sergeant Major Diego Vasquez, who had laughed at a god and thrown another god to safety with his dying breath. When he finished, the Great Hall was silent. The Calvern, beings who had existed for millions of years, who had shaped galaxies and outlived stars, sat in stunned quiet. The elder finally spoke. "Now you understand. I think I am beginning to," Valeth said. "We do not fear humans because they can defeat us," the elder continued. "Many species have that potential. We fear them because they have something we lost when we became immortal. Purpose born from limitation, meaning born from mortality. They know their time is short, and so they waste none of it on hesitation. She rose from her seat, and her form shifted, showing her true age. The weight of a universe on her shoulders. They are not the strongest species in the cosmos. They are not the wisest or the oldest or the most powerful. They are something far more dangerous. Her eyes met Velith's. They are the ones who never stop trying. Given time, they will find a way to buy more time. Given challenges, they will find ways to overcome them. Given death, they will find meaning in it. And the Accords? Velith asked. The laws that forbid us from provoking them? Those exist because we are afraid of what they might become if we gave them a reason to fight us. The elder's voice was soft. Not to protect them from us, to protect us from them. Years passed. Velith never returned to his old life. He had been changed by his experience, marked by it. He carried a piece of human mortality within him now, a gift from Vasquez's impossible throw. He felt time moving through him in a way no Calvern had felt in millions of years. He became an ambassador between his kind and humanity. He helped build bridges, share technology, prepare for the threats that would surely come. The Void Wyams were not the only monsters in darkness. There would be other battles, other sacrifices, other impossible victories. And every year, he returned to the Helion cluster for the memorial. The monument stood on a small moon, carved from white stone that caught the light of 3 suns. 3,000 names were inscribed on its surface, one for every soldier who had flown into the Void Worm and never come back. Velith stood among the crowds of aging veterans and young cadets. He wore a human body now, simple and mortal seeming, because it felt right. Around him, people wept and remembered and told stories about the dead. A small girl, maybe 6 years old, tugged at his sleeve. Her eyes were bright with curiosity. "Were you there?" she asked. "In the battle?" "I was. Were you scared?" Velith knelt down to meet her eyes. He thought about Vasquez, and Torres and Chun. He thought about soldiers, singing as they died, and engineers, working in radiation, and a species that had looked at cosmic horror and decided to fight back anyway. "I was terrified," he said honestly. "More afraid than I had ever been in my entire existence." The girl frowned. "But you're so big and glowing. Why would you be scared?" Velith smiled. It was a human expression, one he had learned from watching them. "Because I finally understood what courage really meant. It does not mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and fighting anyway. Being afraid and loving anyway. Being afraid and living anyway." He looked up at the monument, at the names of 3,000 people who had changed his understanding of the universe. "The humans taught me that," he said. "They taught me that the universe is vast and cold and does not care about any of us. And that is precisely why our choices matter. Why love matters. Why standing beside someone in the darkness matters. They live as if every moment is their last, because it might be. And that makes them more alive than any immortal I have ever known." The girl nodded seriously, as if she understood. Maybe she did. She was human, after all. "My grandpa's name is on the wall," she said. "Diego Vasquez. Mom says he was very brave." Velith's breath caught. He looked at the girl again and saw something of Vasquez in her eyes. That same spark, that same refusal to accept the impossible. "He was," Velith said. His voice was thick. "He was the bravest person I have ever met. And I have met many people in many worlds over many years." The girl smiled. "I'm going to be a soldier too. When I grow up, I'm going to protect people like Grandpa did." Of course she was, because that was what humans did. They passed their fire from generation to generation, each one building on the sacrifices of those who came before. They turned death into legacy and loss into determination. Valith looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, more threats were gathering. More darkness was waiting to consume the light. The universe was vast and cold and full of things it wanted to destroy everything bright and beautiful, but humanity was out there too. Small and brief and impossibly brave. Building sandcastles knowing the tide would come. Loving knowing they would lose. Fighting knowing they might fall. And somehow, that was enough. That was more than enough.